The left hates billionaires, or maybe just some billionaires. How the 1% funds the left. This is Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim. After doubling his stake in the New York Times, Carlos Slim has become its top shareholder. His large stake in the Times has exempted him from being the target of negative coverage. His company has also benefited from a United States welfare program that gives out so-called Obama phones. One of the major suppliers of the free cell phones given out by the government is a company called TracFone, a U.S. subsidiary of América Móvil, which is owned by Carlos Slim. Now, Slim's fortunes depends on tens of millions of Mexicans living legally and illegally in the United States. Slim acquired his fortune through a corrupt inside deal, giving him a monopoly on telecommunication services in Mexico. But in order to make money from his monopoly, Slim needs lots of Mexicans living in the United States sending money to their relatives back in Mexico. Otherwise, Mexicans couldn't pay him, and they wouldn't have much need for phone service. Back in 2004, a Times article stated, quote, "Clearly, the nation's southern border is under siege," unquote. Years later, the New York Times indignantly demanded that Obama, quote, "go big," unquote, on immigration and give millions of immigrants permissions to stay. By all the rules of the left, you're not supposed to trust someone beholden to a rich man, especially one with a specific interest in public policy. If Slim had saved any company in the world other than the New York Times, his sleazy insider deals and business model based on mass illegal immigration to the United States would absolutely be a problem. Now, if you think about immigration issues and this position of the New York Times, think about how that happens. The influence of your largest shareholder does have to play a role. This is the billionaire founder of Amazon.com, Jeff Bezos. In 2014, a $600 million computing cloud developed by Amazon Web Services for the Central Intelligence Agency over the past year previous to that would begin servicing all 17 agencies that make up the intelligence community. It would usher in a new era of cooperation and coordination, allowing agencies to share information and services much more easily and avoid the kind of intelligence gaps that preceded the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. Jeff Bezos, who concluded this deal with the CIA for Amazon, is also the sole owner of The Washington Post. The Washington Post does not fully disclose the relationship of their owner to the intelligence community in any of their intel community reporting. A clear conflict of interest. Interestingly, the Washington Post has also been the source of a large number of unnamed sources and leaks from the intel community damaging to President Trump. Is there some kind of a connection? This is leftist billionaire Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer is a radical environmentalist and top donor to the Democrat Party, having recently given them over $74 million out of his own pocket in just 1 year. Steyer is known for his stance against fossil fuels and especially fracking, but he has extensive ties into Russia going as far back as the 1990s. At that time, his firm, Farallon, provided the investment vehicle to help the former Soviet Union privatize thousands of companies. The two U.S. government officials Farallon worked with were found to be trading on that inside information, a fact that the people at Farallon and Steyer had to know or at least have some measure of awareness of. With his current anti-fracking posture, however, Steyer appears to be on the same side once again as the Russians, who have been discovered to have surreptitiously funded dozens of environmental groups in the United States to lobby against fracking. Most recently, after President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accords, Steyer tweeted that it was a traitorous act of war, and that's a quote. But the clincher is how Steyer and his firm made a fortune bankrolling the very coal industry they now battle. How much additional coal consumption is Steyer actually responsible for? Well, according to the New York Times, The growth of coal consumption by coal mining companies financed by Steyer is more than 70 million tons. Now, to put that in perspective, that is more than the amount of coal consumed by the entire nation of Great Britain in a year. Now, some may say that Steyer today is paying his penance for past environmental sins like the one I just named. It's an interesting point. Maybe it's true, maybe not. But Steyer is also an investor in a business that will win him no friends at all on the left, privatized prisons. Farallon is heavily invested in the Corrections Corporation of America, the nation's largest private prison firm. Let's now turn to billionaire Michael Bloomberg. Bloomberg is another businessman turned politician who began his career as a Republican and somehow transformed himself into a left-wing progressive. As mayor of New York City, Bloomberg became a notorious banner. Rather than allow New Yorkers to make decisions for themselves, Bloomberg believed he knew better and began his Banorama by ordering restaurants to remove salt shakers from their tables. If you wanted salt, you had to ask for it. Nanny Bloomberg then banned the use of trans fats in cooking. Mind you, trans fats may be unhealthy, but shouldn't the consumer make that choice? Nevertheless, undeterred, Bloomberg moved to limit sugary drinks. Here he limited the size of the cups eating establishments could actually offer. Oh, you could buy any number of smaller cups, the Bloomberg-approved ones, but don't you dare try to get a big one. That would be bad, and it would be punishable with a stiff fine if you ever got caught. The insanity continued as Bloomberg moved to ban styrofoam and then smoking. Believe it or not, in New York City's most open space, Central Park, it is illegal to smoke a cigarette. All of this made Bloomberg a laughingstock in most quarters of the country where people are actually sane. But when Bloomberg threw down the gauntlet against the Second Amendment, Americans stopped laughing. Here is a man, Michael Bloomberg, who is surrounded by guards who carry submachine guns, and he's attacking the constitutional right of law-abiding Americans to avail themselves of the same protections he does. It smacks of things worse than hypocrisy. It smacks of elitism, privilege, and classism. In this video, I highlighted just 4 billionaires that the left worships and adores. I could have included a great many more. I left out notables like Bill Gates, for example, the head of Microsoft, or Tim Cook, the head of Apple, and Warren Buffett, the head of Berkshire Hathaway, and of course, last but not least, the infamous Nazi collaborator and insider trader George Soros. I didn't include any of those, and there are a great many more besides them I also could have included. But what does this point out? This points out that despite all their protests about the 1% versus the 99%, without the money from these multi-billionaire providers, the left as a political movement would be roadkill. I put this presentation together because I thought you should know. I know, and let's face it, like a lot of people do know some of this stuff, but not everybody knows it. So if you know anybody that doesn't know this and you think they should, send it on to them. People need to understand, either when they're on the right or the left, when they're being taken for a ride. And leftists are being taken for a ride by these billionaires. They just are. For the great vocal majority, I'm Tony Codispoti. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Take care, everybody.